The fur is flying in Turkey. Demonstrators taking to the streets, accompanied by their four-legged friends. The march in Istanbul and more than a dozen other Turkish cities and towns, all part of a passionate protest to protect animals.
We are trying to prevent a law that may be passing. It's a law that might be killing hundreds of thousands of dogs and cats.
Protesters furious over a proposed law to govern the treatment of animals. According to Turkey's forestry ministry, the purpose of draft law number 5199 is to prevent mistreatment of animals and strengthen the process of adopting strays. But one of its most controversial provisions calls for the creation of natural habitat parks like the one pictured in this government blueprint. In an email to CNN, the forestry ministry described these parks as, quote, places where animals will be looked after, fed, and sheltered until animals are adopted. But critics have denounced the proposed parks, calling them animal concentration camps.
We don't want our dogs from streets to be collected.
Animal rights activists fear the proposed law would lead to the roundup of street animals, fuzzy fixtures in nearly every Turkish neighborhood.
Why do you want to keep animals in the streets of Turkish cities and towns?
It's our culture. That's what we have seen and what we have lived with. We are living with them with centuries.
To outsiders, it can be surprising to see how well some Turks care for the many strays that roam these streets. In Turkey's biggest city, it's not unusual to see cafes and bars adopting their own pets, a practice that extends to street vendors like Hüsnü Ataç. He says he doesn't trust the government would take proper care of the canine companion he calls Chief.
There's historical precedent for this popular distrust. In what's referred to as the Great Dog Massacre of 1910, a Turkish government determined to modernize Istanbul deported tens of thousands of street dogs out to an island here in the Marmara Sea. Afterwards, residents of Istanbul were kept awake at night by the howls of dogs starving to death out on the island.
Today's Turkish government insists there will be no roundup of cats and dogs. If the law is passed, the government points out it will establish jail sentences as the punishment for any physical abuse or exploitation of animals. And that is a measure critics and advocates of the proposed law both agree on. Ivan Watson, CNN, Istanbul.